2 years ago, an unexplained genetic mutation began spreading across the world, transforming some people into all kinds of animals. A father and his son are sitting in a car with the boy's dog next to him. They're sharing a bag of chips, but the father warns his son not to eat that junk or give it to the dog. Ignoring his father's advice, the boy eats anyway. Frustrated about being dragged along on the trip and stuck in traffic, they hear a car horn blaring. Curious, the boy decides to step out and see what's happening. Annoyed by his son's behavior, the father follows, trying to get him back in the car. A little farther up, a commotion erupts around a van. From inside, they hear the sounds of a struggle, and suddenly the van's doors burst open. A bizarre creature leaps out, a human-like figure with feathers on its arms. Several people attempt to wrestle the creature back into the van, but it's too strong. Shocked, the father and son hide behind their car, watching in horror as the creature comes into full view. It's a bird-like human with wings in place of arms and bird-like legs, letting out an ear-piercing screech. The creature leaps over with their car and disappears. Shaken, the father and son scramble back into their vehicle. When they arrive at the clinic, the father heads to a meeting with the doctor. Smiling, the doctor shares good news. Elle's condition has improved significantly. She hasn't had an episode in 3 weeks, indicating that the treatment is working. The doctor also mentions another development. A rehabilitation center in the south is opening earlier than expected, and Elle could be transferred there as soon as May. The father is overjoyed, eagerly telling the doctor that he's already found a house nearby in a school for his son. Amel, however, doesn't share his father's enthusiasm. Frustrated, he reminds his dad that he promised to discuss such decisions with him instead of deciding on his own. The father, trying to calm him down, insists this move will be best for everyone. Emil turns to the doctor and asks pointedly if the center can completely cure his mother if she'll ever be normal again. Avoiding a direct answer, the doctor explains that mutations are a new, complex phenomenon that scientists are still trying to understand. Sensing the boy's hostility, she changes the subject and suggests they visit Elle. In the hospital room, the father talks to his wife while Emil lingers behind a privacy curtain, staring at claw marks on the wall, evidence of her transformation. The father calls him over to say hello, but Emil refuses, arguing that she doesn't even understand what's happening anymore. The father walks over to his son, gently urging him to talk to her, reminding him that no matter what, she's still his mom. Reluctantly, Emil forces a smile and steps toward the creature his mother has become after finalizing all the arrangements. Emil and his father move to the south. Upon arriving in their new town, Francois shows his son the rehabilitation center before driving them to their new home the next day. AIL starts at his new school, where he meets his classmates. One girl, Na, curiously asks why he transferred so late in the year and where his parents are. Emil hesitantly replies that they had to move because of his father's job and that his mother passed away. Realizing she may have touched a sensitive subject, Na quickly apologizes and explains that she has ADH, which sometimes makes her speak before thinking after school. Emil rides his bike to visit his father at work. Francois has taken a job at a local cafe. There, Éole meets the cafe's owner and one of the employees, Nima. During their conversation, the cafe owner expresses disdain for the new rehabilitation center, referring to it as a place for monsters that doesn't belong in their town. Seeing the unease on Emil's face, Nima reassures him, saying there's nothing to fear. Their conversation is interrupted by a sudden gust of wind that knocks over the umbrellas on the outdoor terrace. Emil steps closer to the water and looks at the sky, noticing dark clouds signaling an approaching storm. That night, amidst the sounds of thunder, Emil wakes to hear his father cursing. The storm has caused a power outage, and France is trying to restore the electricity. Joining his father, he approaches the window. A bright flash of lightning briefly illuminates the outside, revealing a mutated human figure standing just beyond the glass. The next instant, Francois successfully turns the power back on, and the creature vanishes into the darkness. The following morning, father and son clear fallen branches from their terrace. As they work, Francois receives a troubling phone call. Without hesitation, he grabs Emile, and they head out on the road. They encounter a block. Section of highway crowded with people and equipment. Francois parks, and despite the gendarme's attempts to stop him, drags Emile toward the scene. His shouting, draws the attention of Sergeant Julia Izero, who approaches them. She informs Francois that a van transporting creatures to the rehabilitation center crashed into the river during the storm. She then asks for Lana's details to aid in the search, assuring him they'll inform him of any updates immediately. That evening, Francois stations himself by the river where the van went down, hanging pieces of his clothing on nearby branches. He hopes that Lana, if she's alive, will recognize their scent and find her way back to them. Neil watches skeptically, refusing to participate, convinced the effort is futile. The next morning, exhausted from a sleepless night, Emil heads to school. During gym class, he stands absent-mindedly in the middle of the field, watching his classmates without participating. Noticing his idleness, the teacher assigns him to one of the teams for a tug-of-war match. Emil joins reluctantly, but as the game begins, he surprises everyone by nearly single-handedly pulling the opposing team to defeat. One of his classmates quickly approaches him, congratulates him on the victory, and invites him to a party on Friday. However, Ale doesn't respond. Stunned by his newfound strength, he abruptly runs off. At home, Emil locks himself in the bathroom and takes out a pair of tweezers. He had noticed something strange under his fingernail. Gritting his teeth in pain, he manages to extract it. A claw. Horrified, he tears off his clothes and discovers that his spine is beginning to change. Desperate, he sits in the bathtub, frantically scrubbing himself as if trying to wash away the mutations. Meanwhile, Francois is at the store purchasing supplies for a trek. He's approached by Julia, who informs him that the gendarmerie has ceased their search effort and that the army has taken over. Their conversation is interrupted by a sudden scream. They rush toward the sound and discover that mutated creatures have broken into the store. Francois hopes against hope that one of them might be Lana, but to his dismay, there are other creatures after the mutants are captured. Julia warns Francois that the forest is now off limits. The next morning, Emil wakes to his father calling him. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he examines his hands and feels along his spine, disturbed by what he senses. His thoughts are interrupted by a message from Na, asking if he's coming to the party on Friday. Leaving his room, Emil sees gear spread out across the table. While eating breakfast, he asks his father what it is. All for Francois explains that they're going to search for his mother over the weekend, insisting that if there are survivors, Elle could be among them. Ale, frustrated, mentions the Friday party he planned to attend, angered by his son's priorities. Francois forbids him from going, but seeing Emil's reaction, he relents and asks him to come home early instead. On Friday, Emil attends the party, enjoying himself and chatting with everyone. Stepping outside, he joins a table of classmates where they discuss the upcoming holiday and their fears. That it might be canceled due to the escape mutants. Suddenly, Emil feels unwell. Concerned, Na offers him a pill, but instead of taking it, Emil inexplicably licks it off her hand. His classmates burst into laughter, but Emil, terrified by a strange behavior, bolts into the forest. The next morning, Emil wakes up by a lake, unable to recall anything from the night before. Staggering home, he quietly slips past his father and locks himself in the bathroom. Stripping off his clothes, he examines his back again, only to spit out feathers from his mouth. In horror later, Francois and Emil set off into the forest to search for Elle. As they walk, Emil hesitantly asks his father how he knew that Elle was changing and whether he felt any disgust toward her altered appearance. Francois replies that he never felt disgust. Lena was simply changing, but no matter what, she was still his wife. Reflecting on this, Emil asks another question, voicing his guilt. Does Francois blame him for what happened since Elle was taken after defending him? Francois shakes his head, responding curtly that what truly annoys him are clumsy phrases and prepackaged answers, not his son. The two search deep into the woods until nightfall, when darkness makes it impossible to continue on foot. They return to the car and drive deeper into the forest. Francois shouts Elle's name at the top of his lungs, his voice carrying into the void. After one particularly loud call, he asks Elle to check the car door for a stack of CDs, rifling through them. Emil finds the one his father is looking for, a disc containing the song Francois had played. When he first asked Lana to dance, sliding the CD into the player, Francois cranked up the volume, and both he and Emil called out Elle's name, their voices blending with the melody in a bittersweet symphony of hope. The two spent the night in the car. At dawn, Ael woke to the pale light of early morning. Examining his fingers, he saw that the claws had spread to more digits. The transformation accelerating suddenly, their dog Albert leaps out of the car window and darts into the forest. Ael bolts after him, chasing the dog through the woods. When he finally catches up, he spots a creature perched in a tree. Before he can react, another beast lunges at him, knocking him to the ground. The eagle-like creature slashes Emil's shoulder with its talons. Hearing his son scream, Francois wakes and rushes to help. He fights off the beast, dragging Ael back to the car and helping him inside. Furious and panicked, Francia insists on taking Ael to a hospital. But Ael refuses, knowing the doctors might discover his mutation. Desperate, he convinces his father to abandon the idea. Arguing that they cannot explain the nature of his wound, as they drive on, they notice unusual movement ahead. A group of nervous horses wanders in the middle of the road surrounded by bustling, agitated people, while Francois and Emile argue. Julia spots them and approaches, greeting them with concern. Noticing the blood on Emile's arm, she asks what happened. Emile quickly lies, saying a dog bit him. Julia informs them about an attack at the stables the previous night where creatures wreaked havoc, leaving carnage in their wake. Glancing again at Emile's injured arm, Julia suggests he see a doctor. Emile refuses adamantly, his fear of being exposed overriding any concern for his safety. They all arrive at the gendarmerie together, where the local doctor stitches up Emile's wound. He repeats the story that he was bitten by a dog while the wound is being stitched and treated. France and Julie step outside, watching the soldiers in arms. The girl offers her help, but the man declines, saying they're fine. At that moment, Ael comes out and they leave back home. The boy inspects and sniffs his stitches, pulling a thread out of the wound. He whines in pain and then begins licking the blood that starts to flow. The next day, sitting in class, Emile constantly gets distracted by the ferrets in the cage. The animals are restless, running and squeaking. Na, sitting next to him, tells him she was worried about him and called, but he didn't seem to care. When Emile looks at his classmate, he notices a feather pendant around her neck, exactly the same one he pulled out of his mouth after the night in the woods. He lunges at the girl, demanding to know where she got it. She immediately pushes him away, and the now completely enraged teenager yells at the ferrets to be quiet. After class, Emile tries to ride his bike home, but he can't seem to get it right, as if he's forgotten how to pedal. Na, walking beside him, reassures him, saying she also acted strangely until they diagnosed her. Looking at the girl, Emile apologizes for his behavior. Smiling, Na invites him to come over to her place. Sitting in her room, the girl shares her hobbies and aspirations with Ael. Distracted from the conversation, he goes to the fridge for a drink. Inside, he finds a dead bird. Na explains she found it in the morning on the doorstep. She doesn't eat meat and is against killing animals, but she plans to take the bird to a food donation center for animals. Leaving Nina's house, the boy heads to the river and goes hunting for fish. After a while, he catches one, and stepping onto the shore, eagerly eats it raw. After his meal, Emile heads to the place where the eaglemen attacked him. As soon as the creature spotted him, Emile pulls a fresh fish out of his backpack and places it on the ground. Stepping aside, the teenager watches as Fix eats the fish and talks about his mother, who was also in the crashed van. However, the creature doesn't trust Emile and tries to chase him away. Noticing the wounds on Fix's body and blood drops on the sand, the boy realizes the creature is trying to learn to fly. He offers a safer spot for training, warning that continuing like this will only result in injury. Emile leads Fix to a lake, and he points to a tree sticking out of the water. If the creature takes off from there, he'll land in the water, which would lessen the impact. But Fix doesn't like the place, saying there are too many branches and logs in the water, and the difference isn't that significant. Emile then offers to clear the area for him and immediately begins working. Fix notices changes in Emile's back and comments that it's lucky the mutation didn't start on his face. After a while, Emile manages to clear the water and Fix begins his training later in the evening. Emile tries to ride his bike home, but he's completely forgotten how to balance or pedal properly. With a desperate shout, he throws the bike into the bushes. At the same time, his father calls and leaves a voicemail. They had agreed that Emile would meet him at a cafe by 8:30, but it's already 9. The cafe owner approaches Francois, complaining that people are canceling reservations because they're afraid of the Roman creatures. He shows him t-shirts with the slogan, "I love animals," but from a distance and a glowing keychain that repels dogs. Despite the threat, the cafe is crowded and Nima is running around with plates trying to keep up. Frenois steps into the backyard to throw out the trash and stock the fridge. Suddenly he hears a noise and, thinking it might be his wife, calls out her name. In the next moment, from the creature's breath, he realizes it's behind him. Turning around, he's horrified to see a mutated walrus. Man, the creature attacks him, and Frenois catches a glimpse of someone running. From the backyard, Nemrele rushes to help calm the creature and force it to release Frenois. Together, they urge the walrus man to leave, and he agrees. Taking a few steps toward the exit, he trips over a chain and in panic runs toward the summer veranda. Seeing the creature, the people in the cafe scatter in panic while Frenois runs to chase after the second creature. Entering the forest, he finally spots his wife, Lana, who is completely transformed into an animal. Returning to the cafe, Frenois and Nima are talking when the guards, including Julia and military personnel, arrive. Francois quietly tells Julia that he saw Elle, and she's definitely alive. Soon after, Emile arrives, apologizing for being late and telling his father that his bike was stolen. Looking at the destruction around him, he asks his father what happened here at school. During lunch, the students discuss the situation with mutants. One of the guys thinks isolating the creatures isn't the solution. They're spreading all over the world, so the rest of the people will have to learn to live with them. Let them live in the forests, like in large parks. But another guy disagrees. He'd gladly kill a few of them while they're talking. Emile nervously picks at his teeth. After a minute, he pulls out a tooth and spits it onto the tray. Trying to explain himself, he lies, saying it was just a baby tooth. After school, the boy goes back into the forest to meet Fix. He watches his training and encourages the creature. The eagleman tries again and again to take off, but each attempt ends in failure, and he falls into the water. After another round of training, Emile removes the mask from his friend's face to treat his wound. Fix tells him that in the hospital, they sent him to a plastic surgeon, but it didn't help fix his face. He also talks about his voice, which is changing, turning into a bird-like squawk that causes him pain. In response to his confession, Emile shares his own changes. It all started with his spine, and he hears a crack like the bones are shifting, but the worst discomfort is the fur. It's as hard as a wolf's, and underneath it's always itching. At that moment, a little frog appears above their heads. She's a shaman girl that fixes things at night. Francois and Julia set out to search for Lanana. They hide from the military patrols in the woods. At one point, the man admits that he's terrified of losing his wife, and the girl reassures him. Moving forward, they find Ael's bike in the bushes. When they return home, Francois calls Emile to talk, but the boy isn't there. Going to the bathroom to wash his hands, Francois notices the drain is clogged. Unscrewing the pipes under the sink, he finds pieces of fur and claws. As soon as Ael gets home, Frenois shows him the claws found in the drain and the bike in the forest. But Emile doesn't want to talk about it or explain his transformation, realizing that his son has been lying all this time. From Frenois' demands that Emile ride the bike right then and there, seeing his father corner him, Emile runs away in tears. Frenois catches up with him and comforts his son, promising that he will always be there. For him the next day, Francois asks his son about the stage of his mutation and who else knows about it. He suggests that they all take tranquilizers and try to act as usual. They just need to hold on for 2 more weeks until the holidays begin. However, he doesn't know what to do next. Simply locking patients in hospital rooms would be barbaric. He read about how it's handled in Norway, where everything is based on coexistence. No one tells you to kill or be killed. Turning to his son, Francois notices Ael eating from his plate like a dog after a long stare. He asks him not to do that in front of others. After eating, Francois examines all the changes and gives Ael advice on how to hide them. In the evening, as Ael is removing his fur, he decides to call Na. She tells him she's reading a story on Reddit about a kidnapped girl after leaving her task. Emile heads into the forest. When he reaches the lake, he's surprised by how many sounds there are in the night forest and asks Na to listen to them. The next day, Emile goes to see Fix again. Upon finding his friend, he realizes that Fix has completely lost his voice and can no longer speak. Emil encourages him, promising that he'll figure something out and assuring him that he will learn to fly soon. Looking at Ale, the eagleman nods, and in the next moment, climbs to the top of a tree. Ale pleads with him not to jump, warning that it's too high and he'll break if he falls. But after gathering his thoughts, Fix finally takes off and flies. Not believing his eyes, a joyous Emil runs to the edge of the lake and watches his happy friend soar. Finally, the feast of Saint John has arrived. The entire town gathers to celebrate. All the cafes and bars set up booths and tables with chairs at one of the stalls. Francois's employer approaches him and informs him that Emil has finally come to work. He expresses his displeasure that Emil is 3 hours late. Angry, Francois goes to the locker room and finds his son. They argue about Emil not listening and the risk of getting caught. In the heat of the argument, Emil attacks his father, biting him on the shoulder. Francois manages to calm him down and sit him on a chair. With tears in his eyes, he is about to trim the claws that have started to show on his son's hands, but he changes his mind. Upset, Emil leaves, leaving his father alone, stepping outside. Emil walks through the crowd of revelers, his eyes unfocused. At some point, Na catches up with him and suggests they take a walk together. They move beyond the festivities and come to a field. There, the girl kisses Emil, and he responds as she strokes his hair and face. And back, she realizes that he is mutating and admits that she suspected it for a while. This doesn't bother her at all, and their kiss evolves into something more. Returning to the festival, Emil meets his classmates. After some time, he goes to the restroom, and one of the boys follows him. The boy reveals that he saw Ale and Na together and pulls out an ultrasound device, turning it on. The classmate enjoys seeing Emil's discomfort from the sound, backing up against the wall. Emil tries to resist reacting, but it's impossible. Losing control, Emil strikes the boy in the face and runs off into the night. The hunt begins immediately. Francois, realizing his son is in danger, rushes to find him. At first, Al is unaware, just walking through the field, but soon he hears voices and realizes he's being pursued. Sprinting with all his might, he heads toward the forest. The hunters are closing in. Desperate, Amel is almost caught, but Fix comes to his aid. In an effort to protect the boy, Fix attacks one of the hunters at the cost of his own life. Fix manages to distract the pursuers, a shot hits its target, and the eagleman collapses. Amel rushes to his side trying to help, but seeing fixed eyes in his arms and hearing the hunters closing in, Emil leaves Fix behind and escapes into the forest. The next morning, Emil arrives at Fix's nest and gently places a blanket over his fallen friend. Afterward, he ventures deeper into the forest, gathering berries and attempting to hunt. After some time, a storm begins, and he takes shelter in a cave. In the morning, he wakes up to strange sounds. Peeking out, he sees his mother in front of him. The creature recognizes its child and tenderly touches him with its snout emerging from the cave. Ale looks around and sees other creatures nearby. Suddenly, soldiers appear from all directions, deploying smoke grenades and attacking the mutants. Screams of pain and rage fill the air. Disoriented and breathing in the smoke, Emil surrenders to the soldiers without resistance. Francois and Julio arrive at the armory, where he sees his son, who is being treated as just a victim. Emil lies, claiming he got lost while walking in the forest. Francois is allowed to take his son home, but Emil must sign the papers. Taking the pen, Emil tries to sign, but instead he rips the paper. At that moment, his animal nature surfaces. Realizing the gendarme understands, Francois attacks him and knocks him unconscious. After stamping the paper, Francois grabs Emil by the arm, and they quickly leave the building. Julia watches them suspiciously in the car. Emil shares that he saw his mother. He then recalls a skiing trip they had during which the weather was terrible, and they walked in snowshoes. When they reached the cable car station, Francois said it was beautiful, referring to the cableway, calling it a technological marvel. Together they laughed loudly as they immersed themselves in the memory. Suddenly, Emil noticed that the gendarmerie was chasing them. He immediately asked if his father would visit him in the center. Francois firmly declared that there would be no centers, and glancing at his son, he shoved a handful of chips, things he despised, into his mouth. Wolves and foxes can reach running at speeds of 50 to 60 kilometers per hour. In the next moment, Francois swerves the car into a closed forest and knocks down the gates. Driving a little further, he pulls over. To the side of the road, opening the door. He tells Emile to run with tears in his eyes. Francois watches his son disappear into the woods, while the Yidars are closing in on his car, with a feeling of complete freedom. Neil races through the forest, and a wild scream escapes his lips. Why do you think humanity tends to destroy anything that falls outside their understanding of what's considered normal?